What is going on, ladies and gentlemen? Welcome back to another edition of the Jays for Days podcast. I'm Josh. He's Josh. We got Jays Jumpers, Jaron Jackson Jr.'s, John Morant's, Joe Johnson's, Ja Raff's, of course. We've got Jays. We got him for days. Josh, how you doing? And then I have a comeback question for you.
Oh, my.
Yeah.
I was just going to say, because I know you saw this too, all I can think about is why I haven't seen somebody take Patrick Beverley's comments and then immediately transition to Jim Mora saying, playoffs? Because I feel
That's fantastic.
That has to... I can't be the only person who's thought of that idea, right?
You can't be.
That has to be LeBron's reaction to this.
We might have to quickly put it together and put it on Twitter because that's there's something to that.
We're talking about the playoffs? Patrick Beverley's out here talking about the playoffs?
And it's one of those things that when you think about what could go wrong with Patrick Beverley on your team, there's all of those things that come to your mind, right? Technical fouls in important situations. He kind of loses his cool. He gets in a fight with Russell Westbrook, like on the floor, like a physical altercation. Like all of those things kind of cross your mind. Not for a single second did I think that he was going to try and, I don't know, puff out his chest to LeBron James and Anthony Davis. I mean, what are you trying to do? Are you trying to assert your dominance here? Like,
I think that's exactly what he's trying to do.
But why? He's either the best player of all time or the second best player of all time, who, depending on who you talk to. Like, what are we trying to do? There is no asserting your dominance when it comes to LeBron James. What could you possibly be achieving? I guess that would be the question I would ask Patrick Beverley.
Achieving? Yeah, I'm not so sure about that. I think the thought process.
What does he think he's achieving?
Making his presence felt and imposing his will a little bit. Whether that's a good idea or not, the idea of I am here, this team, and he's not entirely wrong about this part of it, by and large hasn't delivered, right? There is something to that truth. Now, the way he framed it was amusing. But this idea of I am here to go knock off some of this nonsense and to get this team where it's supposed to be. They haven't done it for the most part without me except for the run in the bubble. I'm going to bring a little bit of an edge this team needs. I think that, in the most simple terms, I think he's trying to instill an edge that team doesn't have.
And my very simple pushback is, when was the last time a team that had Patrick Beverley on it we're talking about Patrick or Patrick Beverley being the reason that team is good? Like, it's kind of like the seventh note on a bullet point list of why that team is good. And Patrick Beverley, he's fine.
I think there's some veteran leadership, cultural stuff in there. At least that's what Patrick Beverley would say.
Okay.
That it goes beyond his... Right, it's not Patrick Beverley speaking from his success as an NBA player. It's Patrick Beverley and the vibes and the intensity and the experience and the edge he brings to a team.
My question...
And the toughness. That's the word I was looking for.
Sure. My question also has to do with NBA pettiness.
Oh, my.
Why do NBA players care what Ronnie 2K rates them in his video game? Like, why do you care? Now, Kevin Durant tweeting at him is the most on-brand Kevin Durant thing I've ever seen in my life. None of it is surprising. I'm just, like why... This would be another... Like, I would like to ask the question, like, why do you care? Like is it it has to be an ego thing, because 100%. That's the only explanation I can come up with.
And it's not exclusive to the NBA. I mean, it's an NFL thing too with Madden.
I just don't understand. Like, who cares?
Yeah, it's 100% ego, dominance, respect kind of. I think if you were to ask, part of it goes into even the respect of. Yeah, Kevin Durant's a 96?
Instead of a 99. Even though I could tell you in about 30 seconds why he's not a 99 anymore.
Right. Yeah, it's 100%. There's not much more to it, in my opinion, than just... Yeah, it's...
That's my... Like, it's an annual thing, too.
Oh, yeah, right. Every single year. Yeah. Madden, 2K, yeah.
I just don't get it. Anyways.
I think that's one of those things that just... You got to be a professional athlete to sort of have that perspective.
I suppose.
And you got to be wired a certain way to get to the point where you're a professional athlete.
That's true. This is also true. You got anything else before we hop into the actual content of this podcast?
I'm ready to go.
The last thing I'll say, really, the end of an era in a very real way in women's sports in general this week. Sue Bird, Serena Williams, both. I mean, we'll see if Serena. I mean, right? Sue Bird seems to be a very more there seems to be more finality to Sue Bird's leaving the WNBA than Serena actually saying, "I'm never playing tennis again."
Right, that one's a little strange.
Right, but from we're talking about two of the greatest women to ever play their sport.
Yep. And Sylvia Fowles too, a couple weeks before Sue Bird, because the Lynx did not have a great regular season. But yeah, 100%. It is. I hadn't thought about it that way, but it is. You're absolutely right. This is very much a defining moment for women's sports, and yeah, we'll see. Hopefully this isn't the end of Serena.
Yeah.
Kind of leaving that door open, but I had not thought about it that way, but you are absolutely right.
Anyways, that's all I had. Also, major tennis brings the heat. I was locked in to tennis until like 1 o'clock yesterday in the morning. Absolutely brings the heat. Anyways, a college basketball podcast. We're now 6 minutes and 29 seconds into this podcast. You haven't heard us talk about college basketball yet, so we're going to do that. As you can see, topic above my head, the next installment of our summer rewind. It's Stats Galore. It's our excuse to look through KenPom and other statistical websites, categories, however you'd like to put it, in an ultimately maybe not that productive manner, for no reason other than to find things that catch our eye and then share them with you and share them with each other. I'm kind of pumped.
I believe there's some point to most of my stats.
Okay, that is fair, but past this podcast, I'm like,
sure.
I mean, there's not a ton that I'm gonna do with these stats, because I'm very much in the, like, you can use the stats to create context for the next season, but
soon enough.
But like a weekend, it's like, okay, I don't really care what their KenPom stats were last year, other than, okay, what's the difference from last year to this year? And then at that point, they're just kind of artifacts.
Right. Soon we're gonna have actual numbers from this season to talk about.
That would be lovely.
Yeah,
that would be lovely. So this is like just a hodgepodge. I think that's the best way. It's Stats Galore. It's really just to use just a lovely word, a regurgitation of stats into this podcast realm. I've got 10, he's got 10. I'm guessing there's going to be a lot of like trivia time type moments. Did you know this? Look what I found out that. This is, we've had several conversations this summer on the pod about things that we would have just talked about anyways. Without the microphone on. This is absolutely one of those. Like, just so many random things while you're waiting for a game to start, that kind of thing. So, very, very excited about this. I've got 10, he's got 10. Without further ado, where do you want to start?
Oh, I'm starting?
Yes, you're starting.
Okay. Well, let's start. Most of these are team specific.
Okay.
But I did do some looking at KenPom MVPs from last season.
Ooh, so did I. I have one at I have KenPom Player of the Year stuff. Okay. I have a KenPom Player of the Year thing.
Okay, so I focused on game MVPs.
Okay.
There are 2 players who had 16 last season that are returning in college basketball this year.
They had 16 that were... Say it one more time.
So,
Sorry.
The most game MVPs of players returning to college basketball this season, 16.
Okay.
2 players.
Okay.
Would you like to try and guess who they are?
One's got to be Oscar Tshiebwe.
He has 15.
He has 15. Okay. Were either of these guys All-Americans?
No.
Do they play in Power 5 conferences?
One does now.
One does now. Interesting. See, my initial thought was Kendrick Davis, but he just moved in within his conference.
That is one of them.
Is that one of them?
Correct.
Okay, Kendrick Davis. But that wasn't the other guy. That wasn't the guy that is now playing.
Right.
So we're talking a transfer.
Yep.
Are we from UT Chat? What's that guy's name?
Malachi Smith.
Yeah, is that him?
15.
I will say I'm impressed with my consistency here. Not Malachi Smith though.
No. You want me to just give it to you?
Yeah, go for it.
Okay. The other one is Johnny Broom.
Oh, okay. I would not have gotten that. Johnny Broom, really?
Yep.
Interesting.
So your other people at 15, of course, Big Maple.
Mm-hmm. Big Maple, my guy.
And Jameer Young, who's now at Maryland, and Norchad Omir, who is at Miami, Florida. Mm-hmm. They all had 15. So a lot of these guys, with the exception of Sheboy, transferred. A lot of these guys were at mid-majors and are now, the highest profile guys moving up to the high major level. Mm-hmm. So I just thought that was kind of interesting that of the returning players, a lot of the guys who were the most valuable game to game, according to KenPom, are now going to be smaller parts of more significant teams. In theory.
In theory. Well, listen, if Malachi Smith is not a smaller part of Gonzaga's team than he was at UT Chat, something went horribly wrong in Spokane this year. Horribly wrong. I like that, though. That's not... The two guys at the top of that list, I guess I was able to guess one of them, so I guess by definition that was one I would have expected, but Johnny Broom, that's a good one. First of my KenPom Player of the Year, I only have one, but my KenPom Player of the Year thing is Oscar Tshiebwe is the only Kentucky player to finish first in KenPom Player of the Year rankings.
Ever?
Well, in the 10 years that they have been doing KenPom Player of the Year. Not Anthony Davis, not Cat. Neither of them even finished second. Now, there's some conversation there about how those teams functioned, right? Because if you look at Anthony Davis's stats at Kentucky, it's clear how good... It was clear how good he was, but from a stats perspective, they don't jump off the page in the way some players' stats jump off the page.
Because he didn't need to score.
Right, exactly. And especially in the way that Oscar Tshiebwe's stats are just absolutely preposterous. Mm-hmm. But, I remember Cat having, and then Cat was that year. Cat was the two lineups year, correct?
Yes, I believe so.
So those two things certainly play into that. And if Anthony Davis had scored a little bit more and Cat played 33 minutes a game, I am pretty confident one of those guys would have. But for a team that has had so many impactful players, and I don't know, if a guy like John Wall would have been in that conversation. I believe, it was either that year or the year before or the year after John Wall was at Kentucky that KenPom actually started hosting those Player of the Year rankings. But for a team that is always in the spotlight, that always has so many good players, and has had three of the 11 most dominant big men in college basketball over the last 12 years. Two of those guys are probably in the top 4 at this point. At this point, Tshiebwe has to be in that conversation for the most important.
Especially for an individual season.
Right.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Right.
We're up there with some really, really impressive years.
Oh, yeah.
I was surprised.
Yeah, that is interesting.
But that's all I had of Kentucky. That was the extent of my deep dive into Kentucky, to be honest with you. Okay, where are we going next?
All right, let's talk about luck.
Oh, yes. Okay.
We're on the same wavelength here.
I think we're on the same wavelength.
Do you know who the luckiest team, according to KenPom, was?
Yes, it was Providence.
That is correct. The other two teams I wanted to highlight in this group, Colorado State 6th, Wisconsin 15th.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
And then did you go to the other end of the spectrum?
I did not.
Okay. I'm going to read you some of the notable high major teams at the bottom of the luck rankings.
Okay.
Utah, Georgetown, Oregon State, St. John's, and Kansas State.
Okay.
Do with that as you please. Obviously, those were teams that, by and large,
so those
struggled.
are just bad basketball teams.
Generally struggled quite a bit.
Uh-huh.
Not all of them, but most of them.
Mm-hmm.
So that certainly is probably part of it, too. But I wanted to sort of go to the other end of this as well.
Providence... Not only is Providence, and as you mentioned, they're the only team inside the top 14 that played in a Power 5 conference, or Power 6 conference. Top 14, because Wisconsin was 15th, correct?
Yes.
Is that what you said?
Yeah.
Yes. Mm-hmm. But that is, and we were talking briefly before the podcast, this is the stat that just makes more sense than any other stat. Part of this was I didn't know that, didn't realize this. like that one just so checks out because you got to have at least some of it to win as many games in close. Because it was like, oh my gosh, Providence won another game by one. Providence.
They were going into, I think it was at least February, and they hadn't lost a game within 5 points or something.
Right, their clutch stats were off the charts.
Yeah.
And I mean, with all due respect to Ed Cooley's team, Ed Cooley had a very good team last year, and I am very much in the teams who are good and like just in general as a philosophy, you put yourself in position to have good luck. I'm very much a believer in that. So it's not a shot at Providence. It just makes sense.
Yes, it 100% does. I saw that and went, yes. Yeah, there were just a lot of... There's just no team that is that much better inherently than another team in those final possessions in clutch time.
Right.
There are teams that are better positioned, and you could argue Providence is one of those because they had multiple offensive weapons and somebody who could get downhill in Jared Bynum. Mm-hmm. But at the end of the day, if you played that season 100 times, I don't think there's another one where they end up with that remarkable of a record in close games. It was absolutely insane what they did for that stretch in the beginning of Big East play.
Agreed. You mentioned a team that I have in another one of my stats. Did you mention Georgia in there as well, or just Georgetown?
Just Georgetown.
Okay, but you mentioned Oregon State.
Yes.
And so Oregon State and Georgia were historically bad defensively last year. They were 318th and 320th at KenPom in adjusted defensive efficiency.
That's tough.
That's impressive. Like to kind of put this into context, Cal in the last 10 years is the second closest to those teams at 286. There were multiple years I looked where the worst Power 5, I think Power 6, but definitely Power 5. The worst Power 5 defensive team at KenPom was inside the top 215 on multiple occasions. And no other time had there been a team outside the top 300. And it happened twice last year with Georgia and Oregon State. The two teams combined to go 9 and 54? 9 and 54? No. Worse than that. No, that's right. 9 and 54. That's a lot. That's really bad. But like even the really bad Power 5 teams tend to like have a defense that is no worse than like 215.
Oh, right. Like
and it was absolutely atrocious.
It is really difficult to get down that far just because of the level of competition you play in your conference. Yeah. I guess I'll say two things. One, let's all remember not to overreact when Oregon State makes an NCAA tournament run. And not make sweeping declarations about the Pac-12 based on said Oregon State run. And two, Mike White has some work to do defensively.
Yeah, that might be the understatement of the century. But yes, Oregon State impressively bad in defensive efficiency, and I was like, wait, Georgia is right there next to them. We have to talk about it.
I love it. All right, I also want to talk about tempo here for a second.
Okay.
Would you like to guess? I have an overall conclusion at the end of this, but would you like to guess what team led the country in tempo last season?
St. John's.
Correct.
Nice.
Wow.
Nice.
Very
Look
impressive.
at that.
And then you had some teams you would expect in the top 15, Georgia, Arizona, Alabama.
Mm-hmm.
So,
up-tempo, that bad of a defense, man. No wonder they went 6 and 26.
So I'm trying to decipher what... Okay. Yeah, so there were 6...
Stand by while we read our own handwriting.
Yes. Everyone else... Okay, so everyone else in the top 15 in tempo was outside the top 143 in overall KenPom ranking.
Okay.
9 of those teams were outside the top 225.
Okay.
So you had some of the best teams in the country and a bunch of teams that did not have a lot of success playing super fast. Mm-hmm. And then on the other end of the spectrum, you had 6 top 100 teams in the bottom 15. And only 2 of those bottom 15 teams were outside the top 215 in overall KenPom, if that makes sense.
Yep.
So I thought that was kind of interesting that going fast in general did not work out so well. Mm-hmm. You had a lot of teams in the 100 to 200 range, in the 70s and 80s and stuff like that, who were your Virginias of the world, right? They weren't fantastic last year, but they were some, I don't remember off the top of my head, but right between 75 and 100 in KenPom.
Mm-hmm.
And at the top, you had Gonzaga, Arizona, Alabama was really good, and a bunch of teams that really struggled. So I just thought that was kind of interesting.
Yeah. I have an adjacent stat, a commentary on a certain stat in the grand scheme of things. So I want to talk about three-point shooting.
Oh, we're going to talk about three-point shooting.
Okay. So my three-point shooting stats all have to do with the context of regular season success versus tournament success.
Oh, okay.
And kind of how like the commentaries are different. So the top 5 3-point shooting teams in the country, all 5 of them made the tournament. The highest seed in the tournament was Purdue at 3. They were tied for 5th. The other 5, so they were tied for 5th. There are 5 teams that have that percentage or better. South Dakota State, Colgate, Virginia Tech, Davidson, and Longwood. All 5 of those teams made the tournament. All 5 of those teams had to win their conference tournament to make the tournament. If I remember, Davidson won the A-10 that tournament.
I believe so. No, Richmond did, didn't they?
Ooh, you're right. So I apologize, Davidson. But here are regular season records. South Dakota State went 30-5. Davidson went 27-7. Longwood went 26-7. Purdue went 29-8. Those are the 6 of the 7 best 3-point shooting teams in the country last year from a percentages perspective. None of them. Purdue was the only team to win a game in the tournament. Everybody else lost in the round of 64. And then and I also want to contrast that with where the 4 Final Four teams finished in 3-point shooting last year, because it's not bad, but it breeds kind of the the holy grail of any college basketball team. It breeds balance. So the 4 Final Four teams: Duke, UNC, Kansas, and Villanova. Also, what a blue blood Final Four.
Yep.
I looked back. I was like looking back at it again to make sure I had it right, and I was like, oh my gosh, like that is that, like all 4 teams are blue, right? Yeah, all 4 teams are some shade of blue.
Right.
They're all blue bloods. It is the epitome of a college basketball Final Four. The Final Four teams, the best 3-point shooting team of the Final Four teams finished 37th last year in 3-point shooting, and that was Duke at 37, tied for 37th. And the worst 3-point shooting team was 59th. So 37th to 59th. My point here is what we've kind of, it's a validation of what we talk about every year. The teams that live and die by the 3-pointer. Yeah. Gonzaga was top 30. They lost in the Sweet 16. So Duke was the highest ranked. Duke and Purdue, after Purdue, Duke was the team that made it the furthest relative to their 3-point shooting percentage. Nobody ahead of Duke in that category made it past the Sweet 16. But all 4 Final Four teams were between 37 and 60. So this conversation of if you're living and dying by the 3-pointer, you're probably not going to make a super deep run in the tournament. But at the same time, if you shoot the 3 really, really well in the regular season, you're probably going to have a pretty good record. Virginia Tech was 23-13, Colgate was 23-12. But the majority of those teams had really, really good regular seasons. I mean, Purdue had the most losses of that top, of those other teams, and they had 8. We talk about that every year. Like, if they have a bad 3-point shooting night, are they going to lose? And granted, these are mid-major teams. Virginia Tech making a run late in the tournament late in the season to steal a bid, the automatic bid for the ACC. But the balance has to be there for the teams that, also at the top of the list, the UAB, Jacksonville State, in terms of teams that made the tournament, Notre Dame. But the balance is where it takes you deep in the
Gotta have a plan B.
This is true.
Yeah.
This is true.
And it also goes to just when you were talking, this makes me think of why I'm so high on Creighton this season. Is because that Creighton team couldn't shoot.
Nope.
They are if they come back with something similar philosophically and statistically to what they were last season, of course they should be better shooting the ball. But they have all the other foundations where they're not the same team they used to be, where they shoot 38, 39, 40% from three, and lose in the round of 32, the Sweet 16, because they have no plan B offensively.
Right.
Just, that's what came through my head when you said that.
So 3-point shooting. Do you have
Yes.
3-point shooting stats?
I have one I'd like to say for the end.
Okay.
But I also have one specific to Virginia Tech, so let's go there since you mentioned them. This is one of the things that makes no sense to me whatsoever.
Okay.
Like you said, Virginia Tech, excellent 3-point shooting team, 39.2%, 47.1% from the field. Do you know how many points they averaged?
How many?
70.8.
Okay.
That was 178th in the country. And they were top 35 in 3-point and field goal percentage. Which tells you this is a commentary on...
their ferocious defense?
Or I was going to go in the direction of rebounding and...
Ferocious, that's not a word.
You're going for some combination of heroic and ferocious?
Horrendous, maybe? I don't know.
Yeah, I was going more on the just not getting enough shots, period. Because 70.8 points is just not a lot.
Yeah,
That
they were
put them-
301st in tempo last year.
Yeah. So you're not playing very fast. You're not getting yourself extra opportunities. It's just very difficult to be that good and that efficient offensively.
Oh,
and
wait,
not score.
sorry. I'm in the wrong year. One moment. Sorry, I was like, they finished under 500. They weren't allowed to make the tournament. Hold on. They were even worse. They were 340th in tempo.
So that's definitely part of it. Those numbers don't compute in my head. Mm-hmm. They were so efficient, but they couldn't figure out how to do it the way Virginia did when they won the national championship, because I think they were scoring something like 75 a game. Mm-hmm. I just found that interesting.
And it kind of added to their inability to get a truly good win.
Yep.
Because they also didn't defend the 3-point line very well, especially in conference play. But yeah, those sets don't exactly add up.
That's all I got.
Thank you. I appreciate that. Where do I want to go next? Let's see. How many of these have I given you already? I've given you 1, 2, 3. I've given you 4. Okay.
I've given you 4 as well.
Okay, perfect. That checks out. Let's see. Let's talk percentage of team shots, because I found this interesting.
Okay.
So KenPom stats are percentage of the team's shots when they're on the floor. Okay. Terrell Brown from Washington was it's usually a stat that's dominated by mid-major guys that are high-volume scorers. Terrell Brown was the highest Power 5 guy at 18th. Do you know who's second?
Malachi Smith?
Nope. Who was second? Sorry, in Power 5 player.
I was going in the wrong direction.
Who was the second highest shot percentage guy when he was on the floor in the country for Power 5 teams?
So this has got to be a player from a really good team.
It was a team that was very good that we were consistently wishing was a little better.
Jaden Ivey.
You're on the right team.
This is when the player's on the floor?
When the player is on the floor.
Zach Edey?
That's correct. Zach Edey was the second highest shot percentage guy while he was on the floor, which checks out because, if it wasn't Jade, and Travion Williams is, 4th on this list. So neither of them played a ton.
Yep.
So because of they both played at least 40% of the minutes, which is the criteria to be on the list. And they also, when they were in the game, a lot of things went through the post, especially if Jaden Ivey wasn't on the floor. But, yeah, that was just a name I was not expecting to see near the top of that list. Also high on that list for Power 5 guys, Scottie Pippen Jr. at Vanderbilt, and there was one more. JD Note. That was the other guy that was right there in terms of the tippity top.
Yeah, she got a bunch of attack-minded, sort of freewheeling guards, and produce bigs.
Right, exactly. It was all the guys that I would expect to be at the top of that list, and then like when I thought about it, I was like, okay, yeah, that actually that makes some sense. Mm-hmm. But I wasn't expecting to see Zach. Like the last thing I think about when I think of Zach Edey is a focal point of the offense that Jaden Ivey is also a part of.
Right. It'll be really interesting to see how that changes this year without Travion Williams, and now that he's going to be the guy down low.
Yeah.
Because you'd have to think it's going to decrease, but this is also still Matt Painter with his big, so the offense is going to run through him.
Right.
And there is no Jaden Ivey, obviously. So
exactly.
Very, very interesting.
Exactly. I'm halfway home.
I would like to discuss experience next.
Please do.
Okay.
I suppose I'll allow it.
So 6 of the 25 most experienced teams in the country made the tournament.
Okay.
They were not exactly the
6 of the 25 most experienced.
Yes.
Okay.
You got Texas Southern, who was a 16 seed, Vermont a 13, Providence a 4, Texas a 6, Richmond a 12, and Seton Hall an 8.
Okay.
So some teams on the lower end, some pretty good teams. Nobody you're looking at as a real national title contender.
Mm-hmm.
There were 2 teams that made it who were 325th or lower in experience.
Okay.
Would you like to guess who those teams were?
First on the list, I would guess, is Duke.
That is correct.
Okay. Second.
This one's trickier.
Made the tournament. Are they young for the same reason that Duke is young?
No.
So they just kind of lost a bunch of guys last year.
There was a significant amount of roster turnover.
Because of transfers or graduation?
Combination. Coaching change as well.
Okay. Were they a good team or just like a middle of the pack team?
Depends on who you ask.
But it's either good or middle of the pack.
Yeah.
Not middle of the pack.
They were flawed.
Okay.
But also very good at times.
Okay.
It was just kind of an entire new era. New players,
Texas
new
Tech?
coach. No.
No, they would have been.
Yeah, they have a lot of... There are not those kind of 3-year
right
guys. Now, they had a couple transfers that came in that were very experienced, but the core of the team was very young. You talked about this team last week.
We talked about this team last week. What did we talk about last week? We talked about departures last week.
Yes. This team lost an important player to the NBA draft who was still eligible to play in college.
Okay.
Who was a sophomore.
Oh, man, you're like putting it on a tee for me. Just tell me.
Marquette.
Oh, okay. Oh, interesting. Okay, yeah.
Because you had your Daryl Morcells, but there were also
Right.
a lot of first and second year guys out there.
Yeah.
So I just thought that was kind of interesting. We talk about success or experience being a key to success and making it easier to be successful. The numbers more or less back that up. Duke, of course, finds a way to overcome that, as Kentucky has in the past with sheer talent.
Yeah.
But also Marquette found a way, so good for Shaka Smart.
Shouts to Shaka Smart. We are a believer in Shaka Smart Marquette era. Yeah, 100%. Okay, where am I going next? You would think I'd be ready for this kind of thing. I want to talk about Power 5 guys who averaged the most points in the country last year.
Okay.
So, again, another stat that is typically littered with some of both. But pretty often, the guy at the very top of that list is a very, very high volume, like...
Terrell Brown.
Correct. Terrell Brown, Marcus Keene.
Scottie Pippen.
Marcus Keene.
Yeah.
When talking about the tippity top of that list, Marcus Keene, Chris Clemens. Last year, it was Peter Kiss from...
Yeah.
Peter, I'm so sorry.
I'm blanking on the school, too.
They played in the tournament, and he kind of crapped the bed, and that made me a little sad.
Coley?
Bryant. So sorry, Peter. Peter was 25.2 points last year. Was not the Northeastern Conference Player of the Year, by the way. He was the tournament MVP, but not the Player of the Year. First part of the question is trivia time. Who was the highest ranked player from a Power 5 school on that list? Who averaged the most points out of all the Power 5 schools?
I'm going to guess Terrell Brown.
No. Terrell efficiency is not exactly Terrell's.
Oh, this is efficiency.
No. I'm saying he took a lot of shots, but Terrell's thing is not efficiency.
Yes, sure. Do I get a conference?
No.
No.
You do get this guy was a lottery pick.
Oh, it's Keegan Murray.
It is Keegan Murray. And the extension of this is that an Iowa player has now 3 years in a row been in the top 5 of points per game in the country. Iowa's about the... And like, when you really think about it, right, it's Luka Garza and Keegan Murray. So this is not... It's not like it's been 3 different players. Right. But the last place I would... Like, there's just nothing... Iowa is the most efficient, lucrative, unsexy offense of all time. It's just a bunch of threes and like not super athletic guys, and then but like Keegan Murray is a different breed of like NBA pro. I mean, Luka Garza came back because he like wasn't gonna get drafted after his first team All-America year, right? And he came back and he did basically the same thing again. But first of all, Keegan Murray had a whale of a year. Like we talked a ton really about Johnny Davis last year because it kind of was unexpected to see him take the step that he did. But Keegan Murray was just absolutely just a preposterous year. And then to just like it's Iowa. That's the mainstay I wouldn't be stunned if the other Murray takes a big step this year and like
you're up next.
and might be kind of in that same conversation. I would not be stunned in an offense that is very lucrative for good scorers. But yeah,
that's what I was gonna say. Yep, Chris Murray, your turn, buddy.
Other guys on that list just for fun. Terrell Brown Jr. was 7th. Javon Free Liberty was 8th. Kofi Coburn, Scottie Pippen Jr., and then 25th was Johnny Davis. EJ Liddell's up there, but then. Then we get to our buddy Boeheims of the world. Anyways, that's number 6 on my list.
All right, number 6 for me is just a statistic, and I'm gonna let you react as you will.
Okay.
I have no greater analysis here.
That is fine.
TCU, UConn, Houston, Kentucky, Memphis, Baylor, Murray State, Alabama, Purdue, Arizona, all top 15 in the country in offensive rebounding percentage.
Read it to me again.
TCU, UConn, Houston, Kentucky, Memphis, Baylor, Murray State, Alabama, Purdue, Arizona. So you've got some of the best teams in the country, and a bunch of good... I think my point here when I was putting this stat in there was basically the high major or very good teams in this top 15 were... all, NCAA tournament, not just NCAA tournament caliber, but actually really good. Mm-hmm. This wasn't a bunch of teams that snuck into the tournament or a bunch of random teams from the SEC, Pac-12, and Big Ten who didn't make the tournament or something. These were, your Baylors, your Kentuckys, Murray State had a great season. Some of these teams, not particularly surprising, UConn, Kentucky, Purdue, with all of their size. But then you have, your Memphis's and Baylor's and stuff. I just thought that was kind of interesting that in terms of indicating success, offensive rebounding percentage did a pretty good job.
Let's see if I can find it. Hopefully I can find it. But so I did, when we were seniors in college, I did a 5 things to know about the upcoming men's basketball season. Mm-hmm. And one of those stats was about rebounding margin. And this is offensive rebounding percentage, right? So kind of in that same vein. And you know what? I'm going to talk and try to find it. But basically the gist of the stat I found was that like 62 of the 68 teams that made the 2019 NCAA tournament had positive rebound margins. And that kind of goes to what you're talking about here. That and like Butler in 2018-19 was horrendous on the glass. They got just out rebounded a ton, and that was a relatively down year for Butler. And so I talked about that in that. But the idea, I think rebounding, when we're looking at rebound, right, extra shots, limiting shots on the other end when talking about rebounding margin in particular. That doesn't surprise me at all that the teams at the top of that list, there are some really good teams up there. I'm not going to be able to find it quick enough for this audio podcast here, but in my SEO, I literally typed in my name and like Butler men's basketball 2019-20 and the Butler Collegiate, and it didn't come up, and I'm a little disappointed about it, but that's okay. I'm not upset about it. Anywho, that doesn't surprise me in the slightest that is at least somewhat of an indicator when it comes to good basketball teams.
It is one of the foundations Tom Izzo has built his program on. You don't hear that very often, but that is 100% part of what Tom Izzo wants his program to be. Mm-hmm. Right? It's rebounding.
Yeah, absolutely.
And it's working out pretty well.
I think you're right. Okay, I've spent way too much time doing this to not find it, so please give me another one, and then I'll give you
Okay. This one is just kind of random.
Okay.
But there were 3 conferences that accounted for 10 of the 15 teams that had the highest defensive turnover percentages in the country.
Okay.
So these were the teams that forced the most turnovers per possession, basically.
Okay.
Would you like to guess what those 3 conferences were?
The 3 conferences that made up the highest turnover percentage.
10 of the 15 highest defensive turnover percentage teams came from these 3 conferences.
Are they all Power 5 conferences?
No. There's one high major.
So the Big East?
No.
I thought you might have been subconsciously saying
no.
high major because...
No. This part didn't shock me. Think about what conference was really good defensively last season.
The Big 12?
Correct.
Okay.
I think I didn't write all the teams now, but I think Baylor was in there, Iowa State, Texas, and I believe one more.
Okay.
Oh, it was Texas Tech, I think.
Okay. Yeah, Texas Tech was like 3rd in defensive efficiency last year.
So I think those were the 4 from the Big 12.
Okay. And the other 2, you have no idea. The other 2 are...
I have no clues to give you if you would like to try and guess them.
The America East.
No. I mean, you're on the right track.
I don't know.
It's the WAC and the MEAC.
The MEAC. WAC and the MEAC.
There you have it. They were playing some aggressive defense, getting all kinds of turnovers over there.
I love it. Okay, I have an excerpt to read from you. Okay. From a, let's see, when was this published? From November 6th, 2019, 5 questions about Butler men's basketball. It's because it didn't have 2019-20 in the title. Which I guess at the time was fine because it was obvious which basketball team was about to start playing games. Okay, quote, I'm quoting myself here. Quote, in 2018-19, Butler was 272nd in the country in rebounding margin. That's pretty bad. On average, the Bulldogs lost the rebounding battle to their opponent by 2 rebounds per game. To give that some context, of the 64 teams in the 2019 NCAA tournament, not including the teams who lost in the first 4, 56 of them had a rebounding margin of 0 or better. And then I asked the readers, to please appreciate the stat because I went through all 64 teams to see what their rebounding margin was. And 8 of the teams who made it, and of the 8 teams who made it despite losing the rebounding battle, more than half were 15 or 16 seeds. So really, they were just bad teams that won their conference tournament, or relatively good mid-major teams, but
teams that struggled in the regular season a little bit.
So
there you go.
Bravo
for doing all that work.
Thank you, and thank you for appreciating my work. Similarly to all the time I spent looking up the rebounding margin of NCAA tournament teams. Okay, so you've given me seven now.
Yes.
I got to catch up.
Yes.
Okay, trivia time. Only Gonzaga and one other team have finished in the top 18 at KenPom each of the last 5 years. Who's the other team?
Kansas.
No.
Really? Oh, that year they were 4th seed.
They finished like 27th that year or something. And that was the David McCormack hurt year, I believe.
Yes, I believe you're right.
Maybe it wasn't. I don't know.
No, I think that was the year he was...
Either that or that was the year that he was supposed to be really good.
Yes, it was that year. Because it was 2 seasons ago.
Yes.
When Baylor won the Big 12.
I believe so. That's
yeah,
right.
And the national championship. Villanova.
Nope.
Is it a high major team?
It is not. It is a team that's from a conference not typically considered one of the 6 best conferences in the country, but 7th
really?
usually. You're gonna be like, yeah.
Houston.
That's correct. I don't have a ton more other than just the consistent.
Yeah.
And every year we look up like, oh my gosh, Houston is like 4th at KenPom again. 18th, and I can't remember which year it was, but 18th is the worst they finished in the last 5 years. Gonzaga is the only other, because your UNCs of the world have had a bad. Duke had that bad year. Kansas had a year that hasn't had a truly bad year, but finished outside the top like 23 one year. And then everybody else kind of cycles in, right? Michigan had a bad year, so Michigan.
And Villanova had the
Michigan
Colin Gillespie injury season,
right,
where they weren't great.
Mm-hmm. So yeah.
Well,
in terms of KenPom consistency, Houston is the only team in the same class as Gonzaga. And Gonzaga is ridiculous. Gonzaga is like top 11 or something, top 12.
Both those teams should finish inside the top 10 again this year, too.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, so that's one. Where am I going next? I got 2 different conference ones. So I've got 2 different conference ones and a team individual one that I want to save for last. Okay. So I'll give you one of those conference ones. So the Big 12 as a conference had a rating of plus 18.74 in efficiency, or 3.32 points ahead of the SEC. That's basically the same gap between the SEC in 2nd and the ACC in 5th. And we can we talked all season about how bad the ACC was, but the gap between SEC at 2 and ACC at 5 was basically the same gap. It was a slightly bigger, but basically the same gap as between Big 12 and the SEC. I wanted to take a moment to appreciate just how good the Big 12 was last year.
I'm stunned Big 10 wasn't 2.
No. There were 7. And my other conference thing is about the SEC. Okay. There were 7 top 33 KenPom teams in the SEC.
KenPom did seem to like the SEC last season. But to the bigger point, yes, the Big 12 is the best conference in the country because, as we talk about all the time, there are so few weak links. You are playing, and now it's going to unfortunately change a little bit, but this iteration, you're playing 70% of your games, at least, against NCAA tournament quality teams. And generally, 7 NCAA tournament teams. Maybe it's 6 depending on the season, but you go through the list and you've got, your 8 or 9 ACC teams probably, your 8 or 9 Big 10 teams, and then 7 or 8 Big 12 teams, and it's basically the entire conference, and then there's the 2 teams, and you go, well, somebody has to take the L's here.
Right, exactly.
It is something that I just don't think gets enough credit, is how good from top, and of course, now it's not even a discussion because as the Big 10 continues this national championship drought that I don't put a lot of stock in. By the way, the Big 12 just had 2 different teams win national titles back to back. They got the depth and the power at the top. It is, yes, still to me grossly underappreciated.
They had another team the year before losing the national championship game.
Right, and the year before that, Kansas was the best team in the country. Right? Well, the COVID year.
I was thinking, 2019 Texas Tech lost to Virginia.
Right.
And 2020 Kansas was
the best team in the country.
Considered the best team in the country.
Then Baylor won, then Kansas won. Yeah.
It's almost like it's not that. We don't have to make it that complicated.
Yeah.
But yes, that's what I had. So now I can continue with my SEC if you'd like.
You have 3 left?
I have 2 left.
Okay, I've got 3 left.
Okay, so then hit me with one.
All right, so I want to jump back to Houston for a second.
Okay.
Again, this is a very random statistic I don't have too much to say about,
okay,
but I thought it was interesting. Of all of the things Houston does well, where would you put rebounding on that list?
I mean, if you made me guess, I'd probably just consider them an above-average rebounding team.
You don't exactly think, right, you think of the defense, you think of the guards, right?
Yeah. The coaching.
Yes, right. Fundamentally sound, don't beat themselves, difficult to play against.
Which I suppose rebounding comes into play there.
Sure. But Houston led the country in offensive rebounds by 23 and were 4th in the country in total rebounds. Now, that was, I believe both of those were actual totals, not averages per game. So, NCAA tournament has something to do with that. But still.
Yeah.
Absolutely dominant on the glass. In addition to the defense and the efficient offense, they just do everything well.
They do everything. They were 12th in rebound margin last year.
Mm-hmm.
Did you just say that?
No.
Okay.
Yeah.
But so
right. Just a really good. It's just not something I associated with Houston, but I started looking for rebounding stuff, and I went, "Oh yeah, there's Houston with the teams you would think your North Carolinas and your Purdue's and the teams with all the giant 7-footers."
Right.
And here's Houston.
that team is unbelievably consistent. Like it is an American athletic conference team. Like, and yes, it is Houston. It is an incredibly storied basketball history, but it has just become. It needs to be on that list with the Gonzagas. As I just laid out, it is becoming an annual thing for Houston to have a team capable of making it to the Final Four. And that's not usually, like, even if nobody would disagree with that, right? It's not like people are going out of their way to saying that's not the case. It's just not how Houston is typically talked about.
And it's not like they load themselves up in non-conference the way Gonzaga does.
Mm-hmm.
Now, of course, their conference schedule and their sort of game-to-game grind in the AAC is more strenuous than Gonzaga's. But it's not like they show up having played 15 NCAA tournament teams. It's a slight exaggeration for Gonzaga, but not that far the past couple of seasons.
Right.
Where you go, okay, yeah, they've been... You get a good test against St. Mary's, you get a good test against San Francisco, BYU, but then you play some cupcakes. But you sort of sandwich that with playing what equates to a high major conference schedule and non-conference.
Right.
Houston isn't afraid to play anybody. They'll play a couple good teams here or there, but they just show up and then they just beat all the high major teams. Yeah. It's really remarkable, like you said. It's just consistency. They always show up in the NCAA tournament. They show up game to game. It's incredible.
When was the last time the SEC finished second in KenPom? You can answer it however you want to. You can answer with who won the SEC that year and who was playing on that team. You could answer with the year.
I was gonna say the last time Florida won the national championship.
That's correct.
Oh,
that's correct.
Let's go.
And when I look at it, it was really because Florida was that good that year. Like they were 35-3. Like the efficiency numbers were off the chart.
Oh, yeah. They brought back the national.
Right. This is year 2 of the national championship team. This is just the sequel, and they were like there was nobody else in that conference that was blowing me away with how good they were. I don't remember off the top of my head, but in 2007, right, it was Florida finished 35-5, was second in efficiency that year, first in offense, 13th in defense, and Tennessee, and then there was Kentucky at 13th, but that was the only other team inside the top 25. So they finished second, but it was really because Florida was that good. And then they had a run early in the KenPom era where they finished like first in back-to-back years, like really early in the KenPom era. But just a commentary on, like, I feel like I've been talking about for the last couple of years, like put the SEC's coaching roster up against anybody.
Oh, for sure.
At this point,
and especially now with Texas and Oklahoma coming in.
Right. Like, and especially last year. I mean, like I said, 7 top 33 KenPom teams in efficiency last year. Auburn, Kentucky, Tennessee, Arkansas, LSU, Alabama, Texas A&M. And they were second, even with the stinkers like Georgia finishing outside of the top 215. They still don't have the overwhelming... Right, when you have 14 teams, it's more difficult to finish at the very top of the KenPom conference rankings because, right, it's just easier to have 10 teams inside the top 127 than it is to have 14 teams inside the top 127. So,
or to have 10 really at least decent teams.
Right. Right, because if you take the top 10, even the top 11 in the SEC last year, the worst ranked team, the top 10, the worst ranked team would have been 64th. Top 11, all of them would have still been inside the top 100. But right, we look at the roster of coaches, and we look, the last couple of years, especially last year, if you took the top 5 SEC teams in the country, the top 5 SEC teams, and you put them up against the top 5 teams against the Power 5 conferences around the country, you feel pretty good about who you got in the SEC. And right, it is, the commentary here is that coaching roster is really excellent at this point, and it's no longer a hopefully two-team national title contender conference, make a deep run in the tournament kind of conference that it was kind of in the middle, from 2013 to 2018.
Yeah. The one knock is that you haven't had that truly elite team for a while. Now, Kentucky came pretty close last season. Kentucky might do it again this season. Mm-hmm. Auburn had a stretch at number 1 there. Then they kind of fell off a little bit. Yeah. But you're absolutely right. And the big thing that's changed for me is, right, you go 5, 6, 7 deep now, and you're looking at these seeds because you've still got it up. 2, 2, 3, 4, 6, 6. Yeah. Those are the teams that made the tournament, right? There was nobody sneaking in. Mm-hmm. They were just all really good all season long. Mm-hmm. And that's something you don't have. That's what you associate with the Big Ten, the Big East when it's really good, and of course the Big 12 just because there are always 5 ranked teams in that conference, it feels like. Right. But absolutely, the SEC is coming, I don't want to say coming back to life because, Kentucky has been there. Mm-hmm. But from a depth standpoint and teams you feel like are top 25, even top 15 programs in the country, you look at what Arkansas is doing, you look at what Nate Oates has done at Alabama, Kentucky's not going anywhere. It is truly, and of course then you have Rick Barnes and Bruce Pearl, who we didn't talk about on that list too. Right. It is incredible how much this conference has improved, and also just the trajectory of these teams and the conference as a whole moving forward, that they're not going anywhere.
No, definitely not. Okay, I've got one more.
Okay, I've got 2.
Okay.
So the top 17 teams in total field goals attempted. So again, this is slightly skewed because if you get to play more games, obviously you're going to take more shots. All of them won at least 21 games.
Okay.
I was trying to see, does the amount of shots you get up impact it? And it's not as impressive when you take the averages, but the point is still the same. 11 of those teams made the NCAA tournament. Would you like to guess who Team 18 was? So this is the first team who didn't win at least 21 games in terms that was 18th in field goals attempted.
St. John's?
That's correct.
I love how predictable St. John's is.
I just had to bring that one up.
Oh, I love it. I love it.
Yeah, of all these teams that had good to great seasons, and the first one who got up a bunch of shots and didn't translate to wins, the Johnnies.
The Johnnies, baby. We're still waiting. I'll believe success in the Big East when I see it. I don't think Andre Curbelo is the guy either. I love that. Okay.
Just wait till you wait for my last one.
Okay. I'll go first with my last one.
Yeah, okay.
We're talking about UNC.
Ah, okay.
You know where UNC finished in efficiency last year? Finished after their run.
11th or something?
16th. They were 18th in adjusted offensive efficiency, 35th in adjusted defensive efficiency. On February 19th, they lost to Virginia Tech. Mm-hmm. At this point, neither of those teams had a quad 1 win. I think it was still at that point. Because they lost on the road. It was a sub. It was still not a quad 1 win for Virginia Tech. I might be wrong about that. But they should not have... A Final Four team typically doesn't lose to Virginia Tech. At least the Virginia Tech team of last year. Right before they go on a run. So, on February 19th, here is where they were sitting in their KenPom rank. So, my point here is that just to take a step back when it comes to where we see teams finish the season at KenPom. Here's on February 19th where they finished. They were 49th overall in KenPom efficiency.
Only? Wow.
They were 49th. They were 22nd in adjusted offensive efficiency. And then here's my favorite one. They were 117th in defensive efficiency on February 19th. They jumped from 117th to 35th at the end of the season.
So you're saying they got a little better defensively?
They got a little better defensively. Which is interesting because I remember the conversation surrounding UNC being, man, look how much better the guards are.
Yeah. And Brady Manick is all of a sudden giving you 18 a game.
Right.
And yeah.
They were better. They went from 22nd to 18th. So they were better. But they were an atrocious defensive team before they went on that run. And yes, now part of that is right, there are, the tournament. I will always believe it's harder to make shots in the tournament, right? But they transformed the tournament being a little bit harder to make shots in a different environment does not account for the 84, 83 spot jump. And Bart Torvik mirrored the same kind of sentiment. They were 23rd and 82nd in offensive and defensive efficiency, finished 17th and 33rd. So, based on what I remember the conversation being around North Carolina when they were making that run, it was, okay, can the guards keep up this efficiency? Can Brady Manek continue to be this good? It was a lot of offensive talk. And where they transformed their team in the last month and a half of the season was on the defensive end.
And that's one of the things, if you want to convince me they're going to be a top 3 team in the country, that's how you do it. Mm-hmm. That's one of the most compelling pieces of evidence I've heard. Because I still have some questions, not whether they can be a top 3 team with this roster, but just with the offensive structure and the way those guards operate. Mm-hmm. But if that defensive change and transformation sticks, now you're onto something. Because you've got enough weapons offensively with Bacot, with Pete Nance, with the guards, that you can survive in an efficient game from Caleb Love. Mm-hmm. You cannot be a top 3 team in the country, and you talk about this all the time too, when you're bad defensively.
Nope.
But if they show up as a top 35 defensive team again, now all of a sudden we've got a national title contender on our hands.
And in KenPom history, that suggests that's still not good enough to win a national championship.
Yep.
Because my favorite KenPom piece of statistic ever is that the worst KenPom defense to win a national championship was Baylor. In the year that they will forever be on my short list of the best college basketball teams ever. And they were 22nd. And the last thing you would say about Baylor is that team was, by definition, according to KenPom, the worst defensive national champion to play in the KenPom era.
Yeah.
That's the last thing I would think to say about that team. So now if they play the defense they played the last 90 days of the season, last 45 days of the season, they should finish inside the top 22 at KenPom efficiency from an efficiency standpoint. But to win a national championship, the history suggests that what they were last year, it makes sense that they came up just short. Mm-hmm. We'll see what their whole body of work on the defensive end looks like this year, but that was I found this stat when I was doing conference preview preparation, but I had to bring it to this podcast. Well, I'm going to talk about it again when we do the ACC preview. I just am, but that's I think that's an overlooked part of what happened at the end of the season for the Tar Heels.
Big fan.
That's all I got. What's your last one?
Are you ready for this?
I'm so ready.
This is right there on the top of this makes all the sense in the world.
Okay.
9 teams attempted at least 29 3-pointers per game last season.
Okay.
7 of those teams shot at least 35% from 3.
Okay.
You take a lot, you make a lot.
Sure.
2 teams did not shoot at least 35%.
Okay.
One of them was Western Carolina at 31.9%.
Okay. That's a lot of threes, not a lot of makes.
Yes. Would you like to guess who the other team was?
Is it St. John's?
No.
That would have been perfect. I'd have been. I might have just. You might have just had to hand it to St. John's and everyone.
No. This team is even more in line with this statistic.
Take a lot of shots, miss a lot of shots. Is it Memphis?
No.
Am I going to be like, oh yeah, duh, when
think
so.
Tell
me?
What programs do you associate, what high major programs do you associate with 3-point shooting?
Purdue, but Purdue was really good last year.
Yeah, no, it's not Purdue.
Iowa? But I don't think it would have been Iowa.
Yeah. I believe Purdue was one of the teams that took at least 29, but they made a good percentage of it. Yeah.
That take a lot of threes.
And we talked about this last season.
We talked about this last
season. Not extensively, but I think we brought it up at least once or twice, that this team just could not hit shots to make their lives, but they were still letting them fly.
It's a Power 5 school.
It is. Very good program. They had a good season.
Good program, had a good season. Just couldn't stop the hemorrhaging of missed 3-point shooting.
Usually they're
Is it Alabama?
Yeah.
Yeah.
30.9% from
Oh,
three.
that's horrendous. But you're absolutely right. Yeah, that's a team that takes a lot of 3-point shots. Yeah.
They were the only basketball team that was relevant in the college landscape who was right up there taking the most 3-pointers in the country and just could not make them to save their lives.
Man, you're right. That is so on brand. That is so on brand.
Because usually they're actually a good maybe not great, but a good 3-point shooting team.
Yeah.
Where this is not a concern. But do you remember that? I feel like we had at least that conversation.
We definitely, because there were people last year who were like, Alabama's going to win the national championship. Yeah. And I just never, okay, let's see. I want to take a look at individual 3-point shooting percentages. So nobody was above 36.5. Only 2 guys were above 35.
And only 3 guys were above 30.
And there were 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 guys taking at least 2 a game. And there's a guy taking 8.5.
6 guys taking at least 2, right?
Excuse me. Yes, 6. Sorry. Yeah, that's impressive. Crazy. And one of the guys that finished above 30% was a guy named Tyler Barnes who played 2.8 minutes a game and appeared in 4 of them.
He got that start though.
He did get that start. He had to have been a senior on senior night, right?
That would make sense.
Yeah, 5th year senior on senior night. Attaboy, Tyler. My man Tyler averaging he let's see, we 2x, 3x. He 6x'd his scoring averages from 2 years ago.
Attaboy.
And has infinitely multiplied his scoring averages from the first 3 years of his career.
Good for him.
A journeyman college basketball player. Shouts to Tyler Barnes from St. Xavier High School in Louisville.
How about
that?
Yeah. Credit to Nate Oates. If you want to put it that way. If he's not going to change how he plays, he's not going to waver in his belief in the analytics. Sometimes it just doesn't go that well for you.
Sometimes it just doesn't go that well.
That's what happened last season.
I love it. What a fun exercise. Do you have anything else that didn't quite make your list that you're just kind of nagging at you?
I have a fun fact that is not a statistic. Okay. I'm very excited to share when we get to our ACC preview.
Okay.
Just looking at our friend Tyler made me think of it, but I'm saving it.
Tyler Barnes made you think about a fun fact?
Yes.
Well, shouts to Tyler contributing to the Jays for Days podcast.
That's really all I've got, though.
All right. Yeah, that's all I've got as well. What's next week? Are we previewing next week?
No, we've got our storylines.
Right. Okay. So still got a couple weeks before we're talking about the ACC, but we're very, very close to previewing the college basketball season. We got one more kind of summer rewind podcast to go through, and then we'll hop into teams this year. We're now less than 2 months away from the beginning of the college basketball season. I am pumped. You got anything else?
I'm out of things.
Alrighty. Please subscribe to the Jays for Days podcast on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and Google Podcasts. Follow us on Twitter at Jays for Days Pod. Check out the YouTube channel. All of that's fun stuff down there in the corner. And we'll be back next week. Thank you so much for listening to this edition of the Jays for Days podcast. I'm Josh. He's Josh. And we will see you later.